All right. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to the Bitcoin Stoa. For any first time listeners here today, the Stoa is a community funded platform. So if you enjoy listening, you can support the project by sending some sats to the QR code on the homepage at bitcoinstoa.com. And that's what lets us do this without ever advertising, which keeps us objective and maintains audio experience. So, with that said, it's my honor today to welcome Mario Gibney, who has kindly donated his time this afternoon to be here with us. Mario, welcome to the Stoa.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
No worries, man. Very grateful for your time. And let's just dive right in. And one thing I really like starting with on these shows, which are just Bitcoin conversations, is what we're calling them. I'd love to start by hearing your Bitcoin story. So, when you first discovered Bitcoin and maybe some of the more meaningful moments that have led you along your journey towards where you are today.
Can I ask you a question first?
You sure can.
What's a stoa?
So a stoa in Greece was like a public space. It was usually a covered portico, like on the Bitcoin Stoa homepage. There's like the actual Acropolis, which is kind of like what a stoa looked like, but it was basically public domain. Anyone could come. Anyone was welcome. You would have philosophers kind of hanging out there having debates and heated discussions. But it was basically just a space where anyone was welcome to have dialogue. And the whole concept is to create a digital stoa in cyberspace where we can have uncensored conversations about everything related to Bitcoin and welcome all perspectives. Not all perspectives will be agreed with, but I think the goal is just to have a public space for the Bitcoin community and for me to learn from all the smart people in Bitcoin. So
yeah. I really should have known that. I studied classics at university, although I haven't really paid attention to that scene for about 10 years now. I guess I'm just looking up right now, actually. Yeah, I was like, isn't that an agora? But I guess agora was an open space. This is roofed. So cool. All right. That's a great namesake. I like that.
Cool.
Right. Well, I guess my turn to answer your question. Yeah, I'd love to dive in. So I've been involved in the Bitcoin space just over 5 years now, coming up on, more than half a decade. Wild.
Nice.
And yeah, no kidding. And yeah, especially in this industry where there's like so much happening, it's almost never time to catch your breath. Right. So I got involved. It was quite a random kind of chance thing to get involved in. Like, as I said earlier, I studied classics, so I was into humanities and like didn't ever have a technical background. Like I spent a lot of time on computers just because I found the internet like a fascinating place to be. I've been involved in like online communities in a big way since I was like a teenager. I mean, I guess it sounds a bit like everyone is, but yeah, I mean, so I was on computers a lot, but never had any sort of training or technical background. But
which is surprising because I've heard you talk on podcasts and you have a very deep technical understanding of Bitcoin, at least. And that's probably from, I know that you spent time at Blockstream. So
yeah, well, that changed once I discovered Bitcoin, but I mean, in my kind of pre-Bitcoin time, like I'd messed around a bit with coding, but like never in a deep way. But yeah, I ended up meeting a friend of a friend at a bar back in 2015, and he was super interested in Bitcoin and Soylent were the two kind of enthusiastic things he was rambling on about, and I thought they were kind of interesting things. And at the time, I was living in South Korea. I was teaching English and studying. I had kind of made that my home for most of my 20s, and yeah, and I was a little aimless at the time, in that I didn't have like a career. I just kind of had these teaching jobs I would do so I could live over there, but I didn't. I in a lot of ways it was like very fortunate timing, in that I had this period of time in spring 2016, about a year after I'd first heard about it, when I kind of not a lot going on and was just like, okay, well, this Bitcoin thing seems kind of interesting. And I found a local meetup group about a 15-20 minute walk from my house, which is crazy close in a city with like 30 million people, right? That was right there. And it was English speaking. It was run by a Dutch guy, Ruben Thompson. And I'm still very good friends with today. And yeah, I just rolled up this meetup because I was curious what this Bitcoin thing was like. And it was a small group, maybe half a dozen people meeting once a week just to chat about the latest developments. And I was pretty much hooked from the start. Part of it was I really hit it off well with the guys that were there, and we became fast friends. And I was just fascinated by the amount of stuff there was to learn about the space, and the fact that it was kind of cross I don't know, field, or like it was a combination of several different fields of study, and that there was the kind of cryptography and networking side of things. There was the finance and monetary policy side of things. There was a whole social layer. So that it kind of really fed into my interest in like a variety of subjects, and the fact that especially in 2016 there was no there wasn't really a good place to get like a formal education on it. So you could show up as a layperson, and if you knew the right places to look, the right people to talk to, you could develop some expertise pretty quickly. And I was really lucky with the meetup group. The guys that were very technically knowledgeable, most of them are developers or taught themselves coding, and so pretty quickly it became all of my spare time. I would kind of work or study, and then it was Bitcoin time, and spent a lot of time on Reddit and later on Twitter, and took some free coding classes online and cryptography courses, and yeah, within like I don't know about a year, I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna try and make a career out of this. And
Wow, that's
I
quick. That's amazing.
yeah, well, I wasn't ready that quickly, but I remember thinking like, okay, this is something I could see myself doing for a long time. And then so 2016, it wasn't like, it was a bit of a lull. Like stuff was starting to pick up again after that kind of after I think it bottomed out in terms of price 2015ish, but then 2017, crypto mania really took off, especially in South Korea. And suddenly we started getting like big turnouts to the meetup group. And I was one of the organizers at that point. So I started giving presentations. And that's a great way to learn something if you commit yourself to teaching other people about it. And as 2017 went on, for those who were involved in the space at the time, you remember there was this kind of a block size civil war going on. If you're new to the space and want to learn about it, I highly recommend the book, The Block Size War by Jonathan Beer. It's an excellent description of kind of what happened. He makes a very big effort to be fair, and also kind of he introduces the ideas and the people in a way that you can really learn about the kind of ethos of the system. It's not just a narrative; it's also quite educational. So I would definitely recommend that book. But as this was going on, our meetup group kind of took a stronger stance on it. Wrote a couple of articles. So for about there was this good 5 minutes in fall of 2017 when a lot of people around the world had heard of the Soul Bitcoin meetup, and it so happens that one of the guys from Blockstream was passing through at the time and swung by the meetup, and I met him there, and he eventually recommended me for my first job in the space, which was I did a bit of freelance writing before, but this was my first full-time gig in the space, where I joined Blockstream as the customer support lead. And so I spent just over 3 years there, being customer support mainly for the Blockstream Green wallet, and then also worked quite closely with the marketing communications team. There was the Blockstream store, which was one of the first places to accept Lightning Network transactions. So I was involved with that and translation efforts, and it was super exciting to be able to join, coming from a completely different field, and get to meet a lot of the top minds in the space, which is super fun. And then about 6 months ago, I joined the Leaden team, where I currently work as director of community. And so that's
a good story.
The quick notes for my journey so far.
Yeah, and there's so many places I can go with this. What are just a note about meetups? Like I'm starting now. I just moved into a new place in Hindenburg, a place in Ottawa, and I'm starting to get together. Like I'm at the very beginnings of doing a weekly gathering, and
right.
I just think that part is very key in order to meet other people and be able to have conversations that you often can't have elsewhere. What would you say are like the key ingredients? What's the recipe for a good meetup from your experience? Because it sounds like the meetup was a big element in your initial sort of dive or exposure to Bitcoin. What are the key ingredients for a good meetup?
Geez, yeah. I mean, that's something you got to be asking Ruben. He's basically the one who ran it. I guess like having regular content is a really good thing. And that like, if you can like do a presentation of a theme for each meetup, and it depends what you want out of it. I've been to a lot of meetup groups since, and I think it was very fortunate the one I showed up at, and that like it was, the guys there were very focused on technical understanding and not so much on price. So that kind of meant that even during the lull periods, there was like, interesting stuff to do, and the people who showed up would be like fun to talk to. Whereas like I remember 2017, 2018, when I left and went to other cities, a lot of the meetups I went to were kind of people who would come through just because they heard this Bitcoin thing was mooning, and which cryptocurrency should I buy? And I didn't find that stuff as interesting. So I guess it depends what you're looking for. Like if you're a person who really wants to deepen your understanding, like try to choose a topic in advance. Be like, okay, this meetup, let's really try to understand like Lightning Network or something, and try to find a person who's in your group who understands it the best and have them try to teach other people about it. I think that's something that was really great. We would do is we would kind of plan out, hey, like this is the topic we're really going to try to dig into. Making sure it's like a regular, occurring thing. I think also quality over quantity. If you kind of have a core group that's kind of shows up super regularly and is kind of committed to this, being interested in the same part of the system, part of the Bitcoin ecosystem that you're interested in. That's really good, and other people will gradually join. I think a lot of places also might kind of maximize for like attendance, and like I also saw a lot of there were other groups that would kind of people would use it just as a kind of a platform to pump their kind of token, and like I mean I feel like if you're listening to this, you probably are not in danger of that, but yeah, I think yeah, having an idea of what you want to talk about and like focusing on like finding people who want to help build their knowledge together is a great kind of framework within which to have
Yeah.
it. But yeah, like that's personally what I want. Like some people are just like, I want to make friends who are also into the same thing, and they're not as interested in like, they don't want to I mean, sorry, I'm almost making it sound like it's like a judgmental thing. Not at all. Like, I mean,
No, no,
not
not at
everyone has
all.
to learn the nuts and bolts. So
Yeah.
I'm just talking about what worked for me. There are definitely more casual meetups out there that people enjoy as well. That's totally fine too.
Yeah, no, that's really good input because it almost depends on the group that you curate, right?
Mm.
And it sounds like it's funny how many people have serendipitous, random chance stories of how they first kind of connected or heard about Bitcoin. Like I'm
Mm.
trained as a physical therapist, and I remember I had this one patient, this annoying computer science patient that just wouldn't stop talking about Bitcoin. And I'm like, the third session, I'm like, well, if I'm gonna have shit to talk about with this dude for an hour straight, I may as well see what this thing is.
Yeah.
And this was in like 2014, so I bought a Bitcoin for $100, and I'm very grateful to that patient now.
Mm.
But at the time, I was like, what is this nerd money this dude's talking about? Like, should I even care about this? Anyway, I'm glad I did. And what was the biggest thing that grabbed you when you first started hearing about Bitcoin? Like you said, it's almost like this Rubik's cube with so many faces, so many
Mm.
applications, and so many on ramps really based on your interest. What was the biggest thing that grabbed you? Because I know some people go into it, they're like, I just want to make money. Some people go into it
Mm.
and they're like, well, this is clearly solving a problem that I'm now starting to understand with our current money, or whatever path they might take. What was the biggest thing for you?
Oh man, this is a really hard question. I get this often, and I never know how to answer it because there wasn't just one single thing. Like, like part of it I think was just luck that the group of guys I found ended up, we hit it off pretty well. They just
Sure.
became really close
That's a big
friends. I
part.
think I was
Yeah.
lucky there. Like, I was thinking about this the other day that I might have shown up to a different meetup in a different city, and it might have been people who were just interested in a completely different aspect of it, and maybe just personality wise didn't go along with it as well, and that might have happened. I might have ended up not getting interested. So I don't know, but that was definitely part of it. I was interested in making money, but that wasn't like my prime interest. I had like some savings that I invested in like Tesla a few years earlier, and like so that was like part of the appeal for me, but it wasn't the whole appeal. I think just that there was a lot of stuff to learn, that it was really accessible, and it was really cool that if you had legit questions, like the top experts in the space were reachable. You could just hit them up on Twitter or Reddit, or like send them I never used IRC, but a lot of the guys I met with would use IRC, and then actually I've used it a couple times, but just the people are right there, and if you have interesting questions, like you can start chatting with them. So just the fact that it was yeah, I mean it was so many little things, and also I had never really learned a whole lot about how the legacy financial system works. And so when I first read the Bitcoin white paper, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I don't really get it. And then they were kind of like, well, go like, do a deeper dive into how, dollars works, how, the Canadian dollar is minted. And I never really paid attention to that before. Then I learned that. I went back to Bitcoin and was fascinated by it. I'd also been pretty, I remember this would have been what, when did Edward Snowden, kind of become quite famous? Like that was about 10 years ago now or something, I think, right?
Yeah.
But I remember like that was something that really struck me, and I had been quite concerned about the rise of surveillance states and kind of the kind of dangers of totalitarianism, and that's always something that I felt very strongly about, and Bitcoin fit quite neatly into there. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's so many, and because I try and think of that too. I'm like, why did I think I just actually looked into it to stop being annoyed by this guy and actually be able to speak his language. But then when I started looking into it, I kind of realized like, wow, this is, and I think the thread that I kind of detect in a lot of people's stories is just they're curious, right? Like curiosity is the biggest thing, to be open-minded, to be like, well, I don't know about this. There's no way to tell if it's relevant or not until I actually find out about it. But when you go down like that, rabbit hole and journey of understanding the legacy system, and you start to see all these red flags of like, well, that doesn't make sense, that's not fair, and you're like, well, shit, okay, maybe this is something that can take hold. And yeah, it's just like the unending, if you're curious and you love learning, it's like the ultimate thing to look into, because you get financially rewarded for understanding it, but you also have this never ending amount of paths to go down and to learn, because even when you keep up or catch up to what's out there, you're like, oh well, it's already just blasted ahead 5,000
Yeah.
more miles, so it's like it doesn't
Yeah.
stop.
Like even today, just keeping up with Lightning developments alone is like, it would be like a
Full-time
full-time job. Yeah.
for an entire company. And the cool thing that you said, where it's like, the experts are accessible and you can see what they write and you can ask them questions. I think a really big thing that I see is like just the generosity with time, of people being willing to actually engage with people and spending their time and energy to teach this stuff to others or share their work. I think that's a really cool thing about just Bitcoin culture. And maybe that's a good question for you next is, Bitcoin it's a monetary system, but it's also a community, right? These people that all kind of align and were brought together to kind of work on or be involved with this thing. And every community inevitably develops a culture, whether you are doing it purposefully or not. It kind of just emerges. And so if someone says, if someone asks you the question, what is Bitcoin culture? How would you answer that? Or what would be your take on that?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, just because there are all these like subcultures that sort of develop as well. Some of which I have mixed feelings about. Like
Sure.
the carnivore diet's a little like overrated, but like that's inevitably like a part of like, I don't know, online Bitcoin Twitter culture. There's a big strain there. I like the kind of aspects of Bitcoin culture that I like the most are I love kind of the open source ethos. I love the anti-authoritarian strain. I really enjoy. I think a really underrated idea is cosmopolitanism. Like this idea that I do think of myself as like a citizen of humanity. Of like I'm a human before I am the member of any certain like kind of a country or anything. And Bitcoin as technology, I really love the kind of appeal of a single global money. Without the drawbacks of like a single global money administered by a single power. There's a lot of danger associated with that. So I think it's that's one of the things that really appealed to me, was this kind of interconnectedness without shared kind of authority, which was and that's that's a strong part of the Bitcoin culture. I also love the solution oriented kind of thinking, or the kind of there's I've been concerned about climate change for a long time, for example, and I think it's a really serious problem, and it's something that we need to do something to address. And one of the frustrations I had meeting with a bunch of other people who were also very concerned about this problem was there was I didn't like meeting with groups that were very took the approach of this is going to be solved by like activism and kind of demands for changes and kind of moralizing. I really didn't like that stuff. I much preferred people who were more solution oriented, people who wanted to build new technology to solve it. And one of the things I really like about the Bitcoin community is that there are people demanding other people solve problems for them. It's, hey, like we have this problem with like, privacy. Let's build, a tool to deal with it. There's, rather than kind of demanding someone else solves their problems for them, there's a big culture of like, let's build a solution for ourselves. And it's a very the word empowering comes to mind. I almost don't like that word because it's overused these days, but there is something very very appealing about that kind of culture, because it's it's a lot of it encourages people to take responsibility and take action and build stuff that's going to make the world a better place, rather than
rather than complain enough and hope that someone else solves it.
It was a nice change in a lot of ways with some groups that I had previously interacted with. So that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah, those are great points. And I never really thought of the mindset of just like this. It is a global money, and the fact that the way we live is becoming more and more global. Where like when people say, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by that? Like, where was I born? Or where do I live? What do you mean by live? Like, where do I spend my time?" And it's like, just saying, like,
live online.
I live in cyberspace, and my meat suit is on Earth. That's like, that's it.
By the way, I had no idea you were in Ottawa. I didn't think you'd be that close. I am.
Yeah. Are you in
Toronto
now?
I am Toronto. Yeah, I just moved here in August, so
Okay,
for
cool.
the new job. But I've been trying to get here for about 5 years. I
Nice.
was on the West Coast when Blockstream hired me. That was where the office was based. But got a lot of friends and family around here, so I'm happy to finally made it. But
Okay,
still,
nice.
citizen of the internet and the world first. And
There you
but
go.
Toronto's a good place to be as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it interesting that like part of the culture of Bitcoin has essentially been hard coded with the protocol, right? Where it's like the protocol itself self-selects people who sort of align with some of the values that are built in, right? Like openness, permissionless, freedom, privacy, like all these things. It seems to attract the kind of people who hold those as values, and those values are almost like part of it is hard coded in the culture. Although, like you said, you have all these like microcosms that develop and
Right.
in areas unrelated, like what you put in your mouth. It's like
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to sign on to that to be into Bitcoin, but
Absolutely. Well, that's why I usually bring I still am interested in Soylent since that guy introduced to me. So I often make a point to be drinking it on these interviews, just as a
yeah,
just
just
as
as a thank you.
a little nudge, just as a well, yeah, and also I because like that's one of the things if you like your first interaction with Bitcoin is through like Twitter or one of these other groups, you might think that like oh all Bitcoiners into the carnivore diet. A lot of them are, and to be honest, I actually love meat. I do eat meat, and I think it's
Yeah, so do
fantastic.
I. I don't think
But
you have to
but
choose
I'm
yes or no. It's like
but yeah, I like drinking it just to signal that like you don't your diet is actually not that important for being part of the Bitcoin community. And there's
right,
actually
exactly.
I find that there's a big proportion of vegans as well in the space. I
Hmm.
think I guess Bitcoin as well attracts people with just extreme opinions in general.
Yes,
Like you don't
that's
find
true.
too many people who are I don't know moderate in their personality
Yeah,
and their beliefs. Like I mean,
yeah.
I in some ways I consider myself kind of centrist, but I'm like that's almost due to the aggregate of the extreme beliefs ends up being kind of I don't know describe it well uh,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, no, I get what you mean. It's
you do find I like that you run into a lot more fringe types of attitudes and personalities.
me too. Yeah, it's a more it's a more very deeper human experience to meet someone who has strong convictions, because just hearing why their convictions strong, regardless of whether they're
Mm.
open minded or not, it's just like it's kind of nice to engage with those people.
Mm. And it's
Um,
interesting. I don't like I
yes,
get really bored when I agree with people too much on stuff.
right.
So I have a tendency to kind of if I'm hanging out with someone for a few hours, I'll often find the thing we disagree on, and that's the
Right.
thing we need to talk
And
about. We got
dive
to
into
dig
that.
into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I share the same mindset. So director of community at Ledden. We can talk about Ledden and the services they offer, because I'm actually, and then at the end I can share a story of like I'm a new client of Ledden and I've had a really, really good experience, and I
It's great
have
to
some
hear.
questions about some of the products just to kind of understand more. But director of community, how do you describe that role? Like what does that look like in day to day, and what is your mindset on like what community means in the context of your role?
Sure. The roles shifted quite a bit just because the company has grown so fast. When I first started talking to the team back in February, for one of my interviews, I got to meet the entire team at once, which was 12 people, and we are above 50 right now. And so,
Wow.
that's within 6 months. So things have shifted a lot. Like I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, I actually joined in early April. And nowadays, a lot of it has to do with owning our communications. Um, and we have a lot of really talented people on the team, but because we are Latin American focused in a large way, one of our founders is from Venezuela, and a lot of our team are bilingual with Spanish or Portuguese as their first language. So as one of the fewer native English speakers, I shouldn't say fewer, maybe half the team's native English speakers, but I'm a lot of stuff around communications and social media and kind of appearances like this, and
Cool.
doing that as well as managing affiliate relationships and kind of more organic marketing type stuff. Right, but it's been like I like being a generalist, so the fact that it's kind of shifted through a bunch of different things has been a lot of fun for me. Right, so
And you
that's kind of
and you can create whatever definition you want, but in reality, when things actually
mm,
start working and growing and developing and evolving, it's like you kind of got to shift with it. So
yeah. I also really enjoy like this wasn't originally why I was hired, but I really enjoy working with our UX designer and kind of offering the retail perspective. I mean, I've been a client of Ledden for about 2 years before I joined, and so that's when we started talking to each other. They were like, "Oh, you know the products really well, and you've seen it from that end of things." So that's yeah, I kind of enjoy bringing that perspective with our designer, for example, was hired from the banking industry, and a lot like most of the people on the team were not Bitcoiners before getting hired. which that was a big surprise for me actually when I joined when I first started working in space. I kind of expected like working for a Bitcoin company you'd be packed with other Bitcoin enthusiasts, but often that's not the case just because you end up needing like web developers, designers, or accountants, and there's only so many people who are super into Bitcoin at the beginning. So one of the things I enjoy about my job is being kind of a subject matter expert and teaching other people internally how kind of Bitcoin works or answering their questions. So that's another thing I really enjoy.
Amazing. Yeah, you get to orange pill people from the inside of a Bitcoin company.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and they're kind of pre-selected too. It's great. It's not.
Yeah.
I'm not going to my physiotherapist and rambling on about it. It's got a high hit rate. Yeah.
There you go. Hey, there's some physios out there who don't know about Bitcoin. So if you're out there and you know Bitcoin, talk about it to them because maybe they'll look into it. Mm-hmm. They'll buy in more expensive than when I did, but still better late than never. There's no late time to go into Bitcoin, right?
Well, I mean, I remember reading that like something like internet access globally right now is still like, I don't know, 60% or something.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Or I mean, I should look this up actually. But yeah.
But you wonder what things like Starlink are going to do to that, right?
That's yeah.
It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. But the fact that like, there's like such a massive, let's see. Yeah. As of January 2021, there were 4.66 billion active internet users worldwide, which is about 60% of the global population. So like if 40% of the population doesn't even have internet access, you're definitely still early getting to Bitcoin. That's very like, early.
Yes, exactly. And even of those 60%, the penetration is so small right now that it's like we're like at the basement floor right now. Right? We haven't even hit the ground floor yet. Although things are accelerating very quickly, it seems, in terms of adoption and just the amount of people and the positions that they hold that are getting into Bitcoin, it just adds so much security to it, right? Like now you have a force in the United States of corporate lobbyists that are now on the side of Bitcoin because there's people who have skin in the game that have a lot of skin in the game. Now, so with Ledn, like I've always been very sort of frustrated by the legacy financial experience, right? Like in Canada, the banks have a monopoly. They don't really have to compete against anyone except for each other, and they make so much money. Consumer banking is not really top priority. And
the big five basically offer like identical services. Like you're not getting much of a difference if you go to BMO versus CIBC versus
you get garbage here, different form of garbage there, and there's not really like they might compete on rates, but in general, the financial experience is like from 30 years ago and hasn't been brought into the modern day. And when when I started interacting with Ledn, just the way that it's done and the structure and the quality of the experience was so much better. Where if I had questions, like I didn't have to freaking wait till Monday to get my questions asked. Like there was a lot of resources, even just on the website, instead of like CIBC, where it's like you go through a maze of bullshit to get nowhere. And so, with maybe this
also, I don't know if did you actually end up reaching out to our client success team, or did you get all the info?
No, I got all the. I was able to just go through with everything. Like
we're also super fast at responding when people. Had you asked us, we would have gotten back to you within a day as well.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. That's good to know because eventually that'll be something that comes up. But maybe give us like a broad overview, a high level overview of what services Ledn offers. And sort of now, another question I had, do you offer your services internationally? Like we have a company division in Australia. Can they access Ledn services?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. I'll take you through the products first. So we offer basic financial services on your Bitcoin and USDC. And the main product people first interact with are our BTC and USDC savings accounts. Quite simple. You deposit your Bitcoin or USDC on a platform, and we lend it out to our institutional partners, generating interest, and we pay you the interest. So right now we offer 6.1% on your first 2 Bitcoins you deposit, and then anything over 2 Bitcoin you deposit on the platform will get 2.25%. And we offer 9% on your USDC. So I mean, if you have dollars sitting in a savings account, you might as well get some USDC and deposit it. We will pay you 9% on that. And
because you're definitely not making anything with your bank.
Yeah, I mean, I good luck finding a US dollar or Canadian dollar savings account that pays you 9%, with no lock-in period, right? You can deposit your coins whenever you need. We commit to within 7 days, but usually like if you request withdrawal, it happens within a day almost every time. And so that's simple enough. You just deposit your coins, you start earning interest on it. And then we also offer Ledn Trade. So you can swap between USDC and BTC. There's no fees on it, just a very, very tight spread. And the cool thing about that is you can continue earning interest even as you trade in and out. Right now, like if you want to earn interest on lots of platforms out there, like, if you want to trade on, Coinbase sort of, you got to withdraw, send it to somewhere else. You're paying fees and withdrawal. You do your trading, and they might offer a slightly tighter spread, but on ours, you can just trade in between, and you just keep earning steady interest the whole time. And then we also have a loan product. So we have dollar loans and B2X loans. So this is for using your Bitcoin as collateral. So if you find yourself in need of accessing some like dollar liquidity, if you sell your Bitcoins, then you can trigger taxable events. You might miss out on future gains if you expect the price to go up soon. So what you can do is you can deposit your Bitcoins on our platform. We will issue you a loan in US dollars or USDC. And once you pay the loan back, then we release your Bitcoin back to you. And what we found were some people wanted to use the Bitcoin as collateral and then use the loan to buy more Bitcoin. So we also offer this as an automated service. Our B2X loans allow you to deposit a certain amount of Bitcoin, and we issue you a loan and then automatically purchase more Bitcoin for you and deposit it. So if you deposit, 1 Bitcoin and take out a B2X loan, you end up with 2 Bitcoins in collateral, and half of that is owed on a loan. And then whenever you want to, you can close the loan. So if the price has gone up, then you end up with more Bitcoin than you started with.
Amazing. And I assume that if you have a Bitcoin savings account and you need to recollateralize, you can just have that go from your Bitcoin savings account and then back that up. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I mean, my backstory is that I'm like the primary financial steward for the resources of this health network that I started a while back in 2015. And so we have this chunk of resources that was sitting in a checking account, essentially melting at an insane rate. Even Jan 20 to 2021, Canadian M2 money supply, I think it was like 18.5%. It went up by. So I was like, okay, well, our purchasing power just melted 18.5%. It's probably not going to slow down immensely anytime soon. I have to solve this problem. So I dove into everything Michael Saylor and kind of took his playbook and applied it to what we did, with the understanding that we're putting this in a sound monetary vehicle that is not leaky. And the intention was, okay, that's now an endowment to fund our future work. And the goal is to never sell our Bitcoin for fiat, to never buy fiat with Bitcoin, essentially. And in order to do that, you need to be able to access collateralized loans, right? To borrow against it, so there's no taxable event, so that the interest is actually tax deductible. And I had looked for a long time at companies like Unchained Capital or companies abroad, and so I was just the international barrier of it being more complicated if you're from Canada and using the services of a US-based company or organization was always kind of like a roadblock. Right. And the second roadblock was like, trying to find an operation that was like a competent custodian, right? Not like some thing that just popped up and was like, yeah, give me your Bitcoin and I'll give it back to you. It's like,
yeah, okay. It takes a lot of trust to deposit your coins on a platform. Yeah.
It does. And I think the ethos of trustlessness in Bitcoin kind of got in the way of me thinking like there's always going to be trust involved, right? Like it's not a matter of never trusting anyone. It's a matter of like doing your due diligence to make sure that you're trusting the right people. And when I finally made up my mind, we kind of put 2 Bitcoin into a leaden savings account, and just the whole experience was really good. And one thing I especially liked was that interest was being paid in Bitcoin. It wasn't like I was getting Canadian dollars. It was just being added to the Bitcoin on a rolling basis. And the idea there was like, okay, if we have this endowment of money, we can keep full custody of that and maybe have a minimize trust a little bit, or we can have that work for us so that when we do need to borrow against it, that resource pool is expanding. And so that has been really, really cool. Now, the one question I have, we haven't looked into the collateralized loans yet, but that's kind of next on the docket, is do you have to lock into a certain period of time? So like, say you put in 1 Bitcoin, say a Bitcoin's $100,000 just for as like a thought experiment. You can then borrow loan to value. I think you limit it you recommend like 50%, although we'd probably go like closer to 20% just to stay almost over collateralized, just to hedge against any big increases or decreases. When you do that, does interest get calculated on a daily basis and is simply rolled forward, or do you have to sign on for like, I'm taking this money for 1 year? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so you can always exit whenever you want to. So like when you sign up for a loan, it is a 1 year period. In that so that's the terms of the loan are for a 1 year period, but the interest is calculated daily, and you can pay back at any time. And as soon as you pay back, your funds are released back to you, no penalty. You're not locked in for any period of time. Actually, none of our products have lock-ins right now. I think there's a possibility in the future we'll offer, slightly better interest rates if you can commit to like depositing your coins for a certain amount of time. Sure. But that's not available at the moment. So currently all of our products allow you to close or withdraw whenever you want. And yeah, so it's for a 1 year term. If you get to the end of that 1 year, you're allowed to extend it for a one-time like admin fee, and then you have another year to pay it back. So you're not forced to close at the end of the year if you don't want to.
Okay.
But no, you're not locked in. Like, so you can take out a loan, and then if it turns out like a month later, you're like, okay, actually I need a Bitcoin back. Here's the dollar amount I owed with 1 month's worth of interest. You pay that back, close it, you got your coins back.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good flexibility. Because like the ideal for me is to almost have like the ideal is to hold no fiat, right? Is to get all of our revenue get shot into Bitcoin, have basically a $0 sum account, and have essentially overdraft capacity based on what loans we will get approved for with the collateral. So it's almost like have zero fiat at all times, go into have negative fiat based on the collateral, and only have that fiat be used as it's needed. So if I have to do payroll, it comes out of that account as like an overdraft account, or if a Visa needs to get paid. So I'm really curious to see how like companies like Ledn evolve to take up more of the experience, the end-to-end experience from banks, right? Like having a Visa connected to a collateralized Bitcoin loan where the Visa is automatically paid based on what's owing, and it's not like I have to borrow $20,000 to pay the Visa. It's just like whatever is owing on that Visa gets paid automatically from my overdraft account with Bitcoin collateral, and then it's like programmable money opens up so many possibilities, and I'm pretty stoked to see what the financial experience evolves into as banks stop evolving and don't improve their experience, and companies like Ledn start to encroach in on what banks offer, because it's just a better cohesive experience. Because by the time banks get into Bitcoin, they're Ledn's going to be miles ahead in terms of their familiarity with technology and how to do it, and having just A/B tested a shitload of different ways of doing it. So yeah, I'm very excited to exit the legacy system, but I don't foresee it being anytime soon. But stuff like what you're doing at Ledn makes me very optimistic.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. Like, honestly, because what you're describing is like the perfect kind of you are the ultimate Ledn client, and the fact that you like basically what you're describing, what you guys' needs were, where you're looking for it, and it also works out pretty well that yeah, we are Canadian, so if that was something you're looking for, based right here in Toronto, but we do offer our services internationally. Like as I was saying earlier, a large portion of our team grew up in Latin America in various places. We offer support in like English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And so we do have a lot of clients, places like Mexico and Colombia and Brazil. And one of the things we love about that is that these are the people that often need this revolution the most. Like you and I, we have our complaints about the legacy financial system here in Canada. But actually, we've got it pretty good compared to a lot of other places. We have people coming to Ledn and like will tell us we're the first place that has ever approved them for a loan. Like that's like, that's why we get up in the morning. That's the kind of stuff that we really love doing. And not to say that we don't value our North American clients as well. Like we're actually thrilled that we're able to provide the services there as well. But the fact that we're able to bring it to places that their options are even worse is right. Yeah, that's why we do it.
Yeah, I mean, most people in North America don't even realize there's a problem with the way money works. Like it's very comfortable, right? We have access to everything.
Yeah,
we can buy I
never thought of it. I never thought of it before I got into Bitcoin, to be honest. Which, like, it's kind of funny. I do have some. I do disagree a bit with the Bitcoin narrative, in that, like, you won't find me calling fiat currency a scam. In that, like, there are definitely certain problems with it, but I can kind of see like how before Bitcoin came along, your only options for digital banking were systems that relied on a single trusted authority. That's just before the Bitcoin breakthrough, that was the only way that it could be done. And so I'm a bit more sympathetic, and I understand how we got to where we were in a way. And just but the fact that like now we have this option, we have this permissionless system, it's so great that we can have so much more innovation can thrive behind it. And we're really thrilled to be at the forefront of that. I do want to make a little comment earlier. You were talking about the kind of trust required to deposit your money with a service. And so I am going to take this time to shill our proof of reserves. Have you had a chance to look into this yet?
I read the proof of reserves section on your website, which I think was like way more transparency than I've seen elsewhere, even just explaining that process and how it's done. It wasn't something that I had seen elsewhere. And you look at places like Unchained where they have that non-rehypothecation. I'd love to hear, like, I don't really quite understand what that means. If you can expand on that, but yeah, if you can talk about proof of reserves and let people know like what that is and why it's relevant, I think that would be an important element for them overcoming the obstacle of of the unknown, right? Of not knowing how, like people always ask, well, if I give them my Bitcoin, what are they doing with that? Are they selling to 100
Right.
people? And, I often say like, well, just understand how it works. If a company doesn't tell you what they're doing with your money, then you probably shouldn't work with that company. But if they're transparent and they let you know, like they're making money somehow, because if they're paying you, they're making money from somewhere. And as long as it's done in a reasonable and transparent way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, like, well, that's like we like being highly transparent is one of our core values, and we really do make an effort to be as open as we can about what happens with your funds. So yeah, if you can't find the answer in the resources, reach out to our team. We'll be happy to talk. Yeah, so that, like, Unchained Capital is interesting. They are for people who don't want to give up custody of their keys. So if you want to take out a loan, from what I understand, you kind of deposit your funds into a multi-sig account with them, and then your coins kind of stay put on the blockchain. You can kind of point to them so nothing's being done with them. That's different than our system. Like with us, we reauthenticate, which means that we do lend out the coins, which is how we generate interest. And what that means for loans is that we're able to offer a more competitive rate. So it's a trade-off. It's the like you are, it does require some more trust, but on the bright side, you get a better interest rate when you do it with us. And so one of the ways that we really endeavor to be as highly transparent as we can are proof of reserve. So we partnered with Armanino LLP, which is a top 25 accounting firm, which provides a service where twice a year we do it right now. We may start doing it more frequently going forward, but twice a year we will allow Armanino LLP to go through our books as an independent auditor, or they offer an independent attestation, and we open our books to them while maintaining client privacy, so they can see all the numbers, but they don't see the client's names or personal information. And they basically go through and ensure that all of our assets and liabilities are in order. They are where we say that they are. The correct amount, is owed or held in reserves. And what you can do is then, twice a year, if you had a balance at the time the attestation was performed, you can then take your own unique client ID hash, and then you go to the Armanino website and you input that, and they will say, yes, there is, this amount of funds were properly accounted for as of this date. And that way you can be assured that there's no funny business going on. For the last decade or so in Bitcoin, there have been these stories of, different services and companies either mismanaging their funds or getting hacked or this type of thing going on. And we realize that it does take a lot of trust. It's a big, if you want to use our services, you're not able to hold your own keys. It's just by the nature of how it works. And so we want to do everything we can to, like, we take that responsibility very seriously. And this is one of the many things we do, aside from being highly transparent about what we do with your funds. We are committed to doing these proof of reserves going forward. We were the first lender in the space to do it, and it's extremely simple to do as well. Like, if you've got your coins, the next proof of reserves should be in January. And if you have any funds on our platform, even a small amount, it takes honestly a few seconds. You log in, get the click, you go to the Armenian website, and then you can verify with them that your funds are there.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just knowing that that people are competent custodians. They're not like leveraging themselves to the tits and then taking risks in that respect. And so I think proof of reserves is a great way to transparently let people know. Not by you just saying, oh, we're being responsible. It's like, here's the proof that we're being responsible. And I think that's very, very important. One of the things I'm curious about is the B2X. So just using like big round numbers, how would that work? If let's say I have one Bitcoin and, actually maybe I'll just say how I currently understand it. You let me know if that's correct or if I'm missing anything.
Sure.
I have a Bitcoin. I deposit it with Ledn. Ledn will use that Bitcoin as collateral to create a loan to buy more Bitcoin. That do you get 100% loan to value? Like, will they buy one more full coin, or is it like based on 50% loan to value where they'll buy like half a coin, and then those two collateralize together to then back whatever loan you took out, and then I guess you have the option to either pay that loan over time or to keep it rolling. And if you kept it rolling, would interest simply accrue over time, and as long as you were collateralized adequately, that would just continue existing?
Yeah, that's correct. The last thing you said. Okay. And so when you open a B2X loan, the initial amount we loan to you is 100% of the value, or slightly over 100% of the value of the initial coin that you collateralize with us. But because
It
the
turns into
process
50%.
automatically buys Bitcoin and adds it to your collateral, it ends up being just over 50% LTV, loan to value, similar to the dollar loans. But yeah, again, because we're automating the purchase for you and just adding to the collateral, we're able to do 100% of your initial collateralized deposit.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, we might have to sort of experiment with that. And I really like the idea of, like the whole concept of freeze drying your Bitcoin, drying your monetary energy into Bitcoin and then lending against it, is that the assumption is that the Bitcoin will appreciate at a significantly faster rate than the interest accruing on whatever you owe. And so, like, for me, the goal is that endowment racks up a fairly big amount owing, but the amount of Bitcoin is outpacing that and outstripping it severely. So you kind of like, you end up having a lot of debt, but you end up having so much in terms of assets that the debt actually ends up being quite small in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I will add at this point, like, Bitcoin is highly volatile, and you do see significant crashes. So, if someone is interested in getting involved with this, please be conservative about the amount you take out. Don't go nuts with it. You want it to be over collateralized, or just either keep extra funds in your savings account so you can instantly move them over if there's a big price move. If you are reasonably conservative with the amount you take out, so you can top off as needed, then it can make sense if you expect the price of Bitcoin to appreciate over time, which many of us do.
Sure. Yeah, and even on a that was more on the business side, but on the personal side, it's like the way I envision it is like if you put whatever you put in Bitcoin, I would take like 10% out as a loan and keep it just super over collateralized. So there's a big enough cushion there that it doesn't, even if it dropped like 40%. Although I think the volatility is going, it obviously long term, the volatility decreases, but I think there's so many more players in the space now that scoop up cheap coins that it's like, I think the downward draws are getting less frequent and less severe, although you never know.
Yeah. Bitcoin even as the aggregate value of all the Bitcoin that's out there gets bigger, it just takes so much more for the price to happen.
Right. It takes more to move it. And then what are the thresholds? Like so 50% loan to value is sort of what you get for your loan. If Bitcoin goes down 20% and now you're at like 60% loan to value, like where are the thresholds where Ledden would be like, okay, you need to recollateralize or else we're going to sell a portion to bring you back into balance?
At 80% is the point at which we will liquidate your collateral to close the loan. We have to use it there just that's the threshold that we determined is enough for us to be confident we're offering a sustainable product. And so we issue warnings at 70% and 75% collateral. Okay. So, if you open a loan and then, Bitcoin crashes by, was it 20, 30%, something like that, then, and you get to the point where your collateral, where the amount you owe is only 70% the value of your collateral, we will send you an email, issue some warnings, and 75%, again, we'll say, please top up your collateral. If it gets to 80%, and then we are forced to liquidate, and then any leftover funds will just get moved to your BTC savings account. But those are the thresholds.
Yeah, and I think the good communication is the big part there. As long as people know, if you don't communicate it regularly, it can seem like a shock, but also it's like that's part of what you're signing on to. You're going to get this is how the business works. I always hear people saying like, oh yeah, companies are telling me I have to put Bitcoin in right now or else I lose it. It's like, well, maybe you're cutting it a little bit too close. That's another, like everyone likes to forfeit responsibility. It's their fault. It's like, well, actually that's just how the business works. Like you have to have adequate collateral. That's how they run their business. So it's like,
we really make an effort to communicate this clearly, when people are signing up for the loans, whenever we speak to customers either privately or in open communication like this, and then we do have the warnings, like, we be careful, but there is a lot of value to be had there if you know how to smartly use them.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, and like I said, I've had I haven't been a Ledden customer for very long, maybe about 2 months, but it's been a great experience so far, and I look forward to seeing how kind of that company evolves and grows. I mean, it sounds like you're growing at kind of blistering pace, so I hope that continues. And yeah, I mean, switching gears, I'd like to ask selfishly a technical question, because I know I've heard you talk on podcasts before, and you have a pretty deep technical understanding. And one thing that I haven't even looked into yet, but plan to start, and I'd love to hear sort of a high level explanation if you could give it. What are side chains? Like,
Okay.
and
Oh, I
how are
thought you were going to ask me about Taproot sidechains. Sure.
yeah, sidechains, and how is that different from like a layer two scaling tech like Lightning? Yeah,
Sure.
just at like without getting too technical, just at a high level view, what the hell is a sidechain? I want to ask you about Taproot today, but once I've
Sure.
researched a little bit more, if we chat again, maybe I will.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, like, depending on your definition of L2, layer two, some people consider sidechains layer two, some people
Okay.
don't. But generally, a layer two is just often referred to as payment solutions that kind of leverage the security from the Bitcoin blockchain, but don't involve regular Bitcoin transactions. So again, Lightning is an easy one to understand. So a sidechain is the definition is a bit slippery and depends on who you ask. But the way I think about it is it's generally a blockchain that operates like has its own kind of independent consensus mechanism. But rather than relying on its own native token, it uses Bitcoin as its primary asset. So the one I'm most familiar with is, of course, Liquid, which was developed by Blockstream, and Liquid works with a federated system, so it's not as decentralized as Bitcoin is, but it's still much more decentralized than just a regular kind of custodian. But there's a federation of block signers, so there are these 15 entities, spread geographically, geopolitically, that take turns signing for blocks, and so as long as a majority of them are online and signing, you get regular blocks every 1 minute, and what you do is you peg in Bitcoin from the main chain. So you send Bitcoin to this multi-sig address held by all of the block signers. And then they will issue you LBTC, which is liquid Bitcoin, essentially, on the liquid sidechain. And so then you have all these Bitcoins that have been pegged in or locked in this giant multi-sig wallet held by the federation members. And then while they essentially get frozen on chain, and then they exist on the liquid sidechain, and then they can be sent to and from each other using this separate blockchain rule set. And then, let's say you have some coins and you want to withdraw them to the main chain, you do a peg out transaction, and then the transaction you'll detail where you want them to get sent to, and then the block signers will, send you your Bitcoin from the multi-sig wallet held on chain. There are different, that's one mechanism, the federated sidechain. There are different sidechain solutions being worked on. I'd give a shout out to Paul Stork, has worked on a thing called Sidechains, which he's been developing for a while. Which I think there's a testnet version right now, but there is some debate about the trade-offs required in order to implement it on Bitcoin. And then, there are kind of a variety of like different potential. But it becomes really tricky because there are a lot of kind of proposed solutions that sort of have the definition of sidechain. Like my friend Ruben Thompson I mentioned earlier has developed a couple of these called space chains, for example. And although I think those are just a one-way peg, where once your Bitcoin is in, it's kind of stuck in there forever.
Locked in.
And and then
I guess the big question is use case. Like, why would someone care about liquid BTC? What does that do that Bitcoin doesn't?
Right. Yeah. So because it's a separate blockchain, it allows you to implement a different rule set. For example, like right now you have these constraints on Bitcoin, whereas we have to be quite conservative about what scripting capabilities we have. If you have, if you had something like a lot of these like smart contract blockchains have a really, really serious trade-offs in terms of validatability, and they scale really, really poorly in a lot of ways because there's just so much data for these smart contracts. So in Bitcoin, we have very, very limited scripting capability, whereas you can issue a side chain that has much more expressive smart contracting, and so you can move your Bitcoin onto there, and then you get the Bitcoin value, and then you get to use these different use cases. You can have things like different block times. For example, Liquid has blocks every minute on the minute, whereas Bitcoin is every 10 minutes on average. So there's some fluctuation, which is is a constraint people have to work with. So being able to send every minute on the minute on Liquid is great. You can, so it's a great environment for experimentation. It allows you to kind of issue these separate chains and then move real value onto them and see how they work. And then if something goes wrong there, it stays limited to the side chain, like the
it's like a sandbox
kind of base layer
that doesn't muddy the Bitcoin one.
Exactly. So it can be useful for testing reasons. It can also be useful just for Liquid has a thing called confidential transactions, which hides the amount. It's really cool kind of math magic where you can verify that the inputs and the outputs add up. But you can't see specifically what the numbers are, so you get enhanced privacy. And again, there's a trade-off there. It does somewhat weaken Bitcoin's the validatability. It doesn't provide quite the same assurances that the Bitcoin blockchain does, but that's okay because any risks there are limited to the sidechain itself. So it's a way of getting a lot more of these different blockchains and their different. If you want to make different trade-offs and capabilities, you can do it with Bitcoin value without externalizing that risk to the Bitcoin chain itself.
Okay, thank you. That's a great explanation. And it seems like it maintains the foundational token of Bitcoin and all of the good things that people love about Bitcoin, but it gives you a little bit more choice. Obviously, there's always going to be, when you have more choice, there's trade-offs, but it is very interesting that there's almost like these parallel branches branching off the main tree of Bitcoin that maintain some of the Bitcoin that have this level of integrity built in because of its foundation, but still allows for experimentation without needing full consensus, right? So we're allowed to play with more freedom and quicker without compromising like the base protocol. And that seems to make a lot of sense.
And you get the benefits of kind of Bitcoin's monetary policy, for example. You get a lot of the benefits of the kind of the assurance of Bitcoin's main chain. And then, one of the big problems as well has been there's just been like so many of these tokens launched, and the incentives often get really skewed when, even if someone has a legit idea for an interesting new type of blockchain, if they have to launch a new token on it, we've just seen how many times that goes awry, and how often people. It just turns into another pump and dump token. This is a way to completely sidestep the kind of trappings there.
Right.
Mimblewimble was an interesting idea, but again, there were some questionable decisions made about how the tokens themselves were launched and issued. Whereas like a Mimblewimble sidechain, for example, would get you the benefits of that new type of. For those who don't know, Mimblewimble was this novel kind of a blockchain idea with like some very, very interesting trade-offs. So really enhanced privacy and certain types of scalability, but with some drawbacks in terms of validatability. And this kind of paper on it was released about 5 years ago, and again, a couple coins were launched on it, but then there was some questionable activity regarding the kind of the tokenomics of it, essentially. Whereas a Mimblewimble sidechain would just like sidestep all that and kind of allow people to play around with the with kind of its value prop, with actual Bitcoins.
Cool. Yeah, and it seems like sidechains present a really big opportunity to swallow a lot of the let's call them tech startups that have started and maybe might not have a whole lot of strength in them, but like these projects that are like, oh, Bitcoin doesn't do this, so we're going to do this, but they don't really mention the privacy or like security trade-offs. It seems like those claims essentially get swallowed with the sandbox of sidechains with just more reliability built in. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time, and as more sidechains come up, and maybe experiments get done on sidechains that can eventually be implemented in Bitcoin because there's been some proof of concept.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one of the main that's being explicitly tried with a Simplicity, which is a new scripting language for blockchain specifically. I mentioned earlier that on Bitcoin the scripting can be quite limited because we want to guarantee the core properties of Bitcoin, whereas Simplicity is a proposed language to allow much greater expressibility, but while also without compromising on any of Bitcoin's properties. But it's currently being developed and is still experimental. And the idea, it's also being developed by the blockchain research team. And the idea is that they're going to launch it on Liquid first. And if things go well there, then it could become something that is proposed to be launched on Bitcoin. It's probably quite a few years away, but that is honestly, I think it's one of the most underrated things happening in the Bitcoin space. Partly because it's very, very difficult to understand. But
Bitcoin itself is difficult enough to understand.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, as you say, it's a perfect example of what you were saying there.
Amazing. So I know. I don't know if you're still nerding out on technical stuff, but if you are, what big thing are you kind of diving deep into right now, if anything?
Oh, geez, I haven't actually been diving deep into technical stuff in a while. I think the last time I was doing that was in the spring when kind of Taproot lock-in was a bit of was all the rage, and so I'm excited for that to launch. That'll go live in November. And then it's going to be interesting seeing what technical updates are coming after it. Some things that come to mind are Sikash any prev out, any previous output. This would be a way to essentially supercharge Lightning Network. It would make Lightning Network contracting safer. It would kind of reduce the chance of funds getting lost, and it also would enable some other tech like state chains is another novel layer 2 solution, also proposed by Ruben, as I mentioned earlier. And
dude, you lucked out with being able to link up with Ruben. This guy sounds like a G.
Yeah, no, he taught me like probably 90% of what I know about the system. Yeah, so any prev out is one. Jeremy Rubin is working on something called check template verify. I don't understand it well enough to be an advocate for it, but it seems quite interesting. It would allow for things like covenants and I forget what the other term is. So yeah, check template verify is an interesting thing to look into if they're more technically inclined. And then something else with Taproot, one of the
Taproot
involves
is like another thing
exactly.
That I've heard.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, like Taproot involves a couple of different things being added, including Schnorr signatures, which are a type of digital signature that are a bit more offer some better features than ECDSA signatures, which is what Bitcoin has used to date. And then in the future, we could have cross-input signature aggregation, which would essentially be a big scaling upgrade and would also incentivize more transactions that have more inputs and outputs, which have some positive privacy implications. So things like coin joins to kind of enhance Bitcoin's fungibility and kind of safeguarded against surveillance companies a bit stronger. Right. So cross-input signature aggregation is a really interesting one that hopefully we'll get in a few years. So those are the big ones I'm bugging out about right now.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it seems like all the problems, and every problem with Bitcoin is transient because the nature of software is that it's always transient, right? Like the core principles have not moved and will not move. Like 21 million is probably not going to move. But if a problem arises, if governments are starting to peer into the blockchain and find it easier to find people's transactions, like don't fuck with open source computer nerds that just solve problems. Like you're not going to win, right? Like the problems will be, it might take a while to solve because the whole thing with Bitcoin is like move slow and don't break anything. But I think oftentimes with enough time that goes by, it's like, it seems like all these problems are getting solved or are in the works towards getting solved eventually.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, yes and no. I'm not sure we're ever going to get to the point where kind of fungibility is solved and that's it. I think there's.
What do you mean by fungibility in terms? Because the way I understand it is like one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Neither of them are different. And so, what context do you see fungibility as something that's a potential issue?
Right. So fungibility and privacy are often used interchangeably in Bitcoin because if you have a system that is not very private and you have state actors that can pay these surveillance companies to track where your Bitcoins came from, what they could do is they could
they can label coins. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. And then you might have the situation where certain entities might refuse to accept certain coins, and then so you need to trade them somewhere else, and then that might affect their value. And you might have a situation like this is like kind of really bad future for Bitcoin is if privacy is so poor that a lot of coins are traded at a different value because they won't be accepted in many places, until they've been used so much. And that's what we mean by fungibility. So that's why the two go hand in hand. In order for Bitcoin to be properly fungible, for coins to be equally valued, each coin should be we want its history to be as obfuscated as possible. This is just an important property that money needs to have. So that's why, you'll often hear people using fungibility and privacy interchangeably. I almost like the I don't want. I agree with you that it's really cool and that if don't fuck with the the ideological nerds because we will build solutions for it. But at the same time, I don't think we're going to get to this point in 5-10 years from now where boom, fungibility has just been solved on Bitcoin's blockchain. I think it's going to be an ongoing effort about building tools, making the tools really user friendly. So that one of the cool things is there's a technique called pay join, which is essentially like a minimal coin join where kind of the sender and receiver combine to make each add an input to a transaction. And one of the cool things about this is with signature aggregation, it could become cheaper than regular transactions. in which case you might get people doing this, which would enhance fungibility and privacy, even if they don't care about it, just because they would pay
Right.
reduced fees.
Have it be
That's the kind of
automatic.
stuff that we really want to be able to, exactly. Now, at the same time, there's always going to be developments going on the surveillance side of things. So I almost see them as like, it's an inevitable thing that's going to pop up. There's money to be made there. There are companies and governments that are going to pay money for you to spy on people. So we have to kind of assume that these other companies will exist.
It's almost like radar detectors for cars. It's like you can get a radar detector, but within 2 years, there's a new radar gun that can't be detected by that detector. And then you have to, it's constant upgrades. And I think there's also like an element of a little bit of personal responsibility where there will be privately made tools like coin joins, like Samurai has their Whirlpool. And I think people becoming more literate in ways that they can achieve whatever privacy level that they deem required for them. There's also a little bit of personal responsibility that people can take to get that. It's like the whole protocol doesn't need to evolve because of your privacy requirements. Although I think knowing that we want to have privacy as a tightly held value moving forward, I think that's there, and there's probably always going to be some things in the works to get there.
Honestly, the guys look into PayJoin. That's probably the thing that I think is most
PayJoin. Okay.
That I am most interested in and think is highly underrated. It's it's already doable.
Is this a wallet feature?
Yeah.
Or like where would someone look into
some
PayJoin?
wallets have. Yeah, so like if you have a wallet provider and you're using it, ask them when they're going to implement it. I know a BTC Pay server allows you to send and receive with PayJoin transactions, and I forget which wallets do. But yeah, it's a really interesting idea, and I think the more widespread it becomes, the better. And it's like the one drawback there. I guess there's a bit of a minor drawback in that, like, even though you get enhanced privacy for the system as a whole, the kind of the receiver will be revealing one of their outputs to the sender, which is a bit of a drawback, but that's quite minor in terms of the benefits. And then the other thing is that both sender and receiver need to be online at the same time, because it does involve a couple, sending a transaction template, filling in an input, sending it back. I forget how many rounds. I think it might be 1.5 rounds of communication, but it's a really interesting idea. And considering that a lot of the time people are online at the same time, I think it'd be great if more people used it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Ask your wallet provider today.
Ask your wallet. Yeah. Wallets have to get pressure from the people using them to like truly get a signal that they need to implement something. So I like what you said, where it's like, ask your wallet provider when they're implementing it, not if.
Yeah.
So I want to be sensitive with your time. We've got 16 minutes left. I'd like to ask one final question about Ledn, and then I'd like to do some rapid fire ones that are just like quick answer, top of the head. And the one about Ledn is like based on, conversations that you have with people on the team, or even meetings maybe with leadership. Where do you see, like, in 5 years, what do you, as like a thought experiment in an ideal world, what kind of services do you see Ledn being able to offer, if anything different than they currently do, to sort of, I don't know, be able to, does Ledn have any intention to kind of chew into some of the legacy financial offerings and offer a broader service array than what they currently do? Or do they just want to be really good at what they do? Do you have any kind of feel for what they might be seeing in the future?
Well, I mean, yes to both. Like we're definitely not going to sacrifice on the kind of core products we have right now, but we absolutely, there's a bunch of different directions we want to take things. Like we want to help you maximize, like get the most out of your digital assets, like your Bitcoin and USDC. We are going to be adding ETH in the future. We would love to be able to add, fixed term savings accounts to offer a better interest rate. There are many directions we can expand with this. A lot of, I don't think any of the financial services offered by banks are safe. Let's just put it that way. We have a lot of things coming in the works. So, as you said before, like you would love to be able to exit the legacy financial system entirely. We just want to take steps to get closer and closer to that. So basically, an enhanced versions of our products, offering a larger variety of different terms would be something we're currently looking into, and to be able to offer different types of savings accounts. And we would love to in the future be able to, like right now, you have to buy your Bitcoin and USDC somewhere else. We're not an on-ramp at the moment, but that is something we would love to move towards becoming in the medium term, and just be able to kind of be like a one-stop shop and like use us as your kind of go-to financial base. That would be that's the dream. There's a lot of room to expand here, and I almost don't want to I don't want to say too much because we have some surprises coming down the
That's okay.
line. But yeah, we also it's interesting as well that like this was a big change for me coming from Blockstream, which is a lot of like open source tooling, infrastructure layer kind of stuff. Where I would offer people support for our wallets, and we wouldn't do KYC on them because it was a non-custodial wallet, and
Hmm.
so the challenges there were very different to the regulatory environment we exist in Leaden, where there are a lot more challenges around kind of the terms we use, and because it's an ongoing it's constantly developing the regulatory environment. So we have to stay really ahead of that and kind of carefully pick and choose which products we expand into. We are a bit more conservative than our competitors in terms of the kind of jurisdictions we expand into and the products we offer, basically because we never want to have to remove services to a region. And we've been very fortunate that like our legal team has been excellent at keeping us ahead of the curve. And we've been able to, we aim to be tortoise, not the hare.
Right.
We're in this for the long term. We want to be able to offer our services in a really consistent way, so that clients don't need to worry about any changing environment affecting us adversely. So yeah, I would love to say more, but yeah,
All
like
right.
for now, I
We'll
would
do a
just
round two in
suggest like
6 months, and maybe you
yeah,
can say more then.
absolutely, yeah. I think it's gonna be interesting stuff coming around the new year. But that's
Yeah,
all
I
I'll say
like
for now.
I like that tortoise approach because it's like make sure you do it well. Like you said,
Move
holding
slow
someone's
and don't
Bitcoin,
break things.
you don't break
Yeah, like
anything, right? It's like people don't want you to break shit when you're holding their Bitcoins. And so I think
yeah.
just starting with like obviously like a Bitcoin savings account where you're taking custody of someone's Bitcoin is like that's a really important one to nail. And it's almost like that's the foundation everything's built on, right? When someone trusts you with their Bitcoins, you can then offer different ways of leveraging that Bitcoin. But I'd rather start with someone who nailed that first than with someone who's doing all the wild shit but hasn't even proved that they're a competent custodian yet. And yeah, it's really cool to see like these companies emerge and like the pioneers, right, that are doing this, doing it well, taking it very seriously, being transparent, providing a great customer experience. Like I said, I haven't actually had to call or contact the team because it was a pretty straightforward experience.
Mm.
But I would imagine that when and if people do, like I'm familiar with wallets and key management, and so it was pretty easy for me to know. Okay, well, if they gave me an address, I send the Bitcoin there. I'll
Yeah.
verify it on my node, and it's all good. But I would imagine for most people that might be a very foreign process, especially if they're like, "Hey, I have this amount of Bitcoin on an exchange. What do I do?" Like that requires a very gentle on ramp, and it
Mm.
sounds like the people who crush that, the people who nail that, will essentially be the winners in the end. So, all
Yeah,
right,
no, thrilled you've had a good experience so far. Yeah.
yeah. It's
Although I'm
been
not
awesome,
surprised. We have a 4.8 rating on Trustpilot, so it's
powerful.
yeah.
So rapid fire questions to finish off, and then
Let's do it.
we'll get us off here in 11 minutes. So the first one, and you can keep it short, or it can be as long as you want. What does being a Bitcoiner mean to you?
Ooh, being a Bitcoiner means taking a lot of personal responsibility for and for your finances, and yeah, I mean it. Oh man, I'm never good at the labels. What else? What does it mean to me?
It's okay.
Being
There's no
enthusiast,
wrong answer.
sharing it, being the guy that people ask about Bitcoin among your friends and family and extended social network. That's when you're the Bitcoiner. You're the
Okay,
person
yeah.
people come to.
Yeah, that one resonates with me too because I mean, people think that being a Bitcoiner means just owning some of the asset, but I think it's like almost has to go
That's
one layer deeper.
fine.
Where
I don't gatekeep. If
sure,
you own
sure.
0.001 Bitcoin,
Such
you're
a
a
nice guy,
Bitcoiner.
Mario.
You're in it with us. It's
You're in the club. You're in the club.
yeah, man.
Next up, what's your favorite book recommendation for a beginner who's curious about Bitcoin but knows nothing about it?
Geez, that's tough. Well, I mean, I already shilled the block size war, but you probably want to learn a bit about Bitcoin before
That's
you
a
do that one.
deeper topic.
That's yeah, that's true. Honestly, I that's the only book about Bitcoin I've actually read start to
Wow.
finish. I haven't read any other ones. I've read like pieces of other ones and then
You
like
just been
didn't
around the
finish
right
them.
people to be able to teach you.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it changes so fast. Like by the time a book comes out, it's often outdated. I know. Yeah, Andreas Antonopoulos' videos are pretty good. He's really good at expressing the kind of the ethos. And I know it's not a book, but that's the answer you're getting.
That's okay. That's good. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to hear
There
what
you
people say. What are you most concerned about with Bitcoin, if anything in particular?
go. What am I most concerned about? the I think the biggest outstanding challenge Bitcoin has is in the next 10, 20 years, the Bitcoin block reward is going to dwindle and become negligible, and security will have to rely entirely on fees. I think that we've got a very, very strong chance of a proper block space market developing so that there's sufficient security from fees. But I think that's kind of the last big hurdle. And we're going to approach it very slowly over the next 10, 20 years. And it's something that I find really interesting. I've talked about it a lot over the last 2 years, and stuff changes slowly enough that I kind of haven't chatted the last year or so. But that's a really interesting kind of, I see that as kind of the final boss for Bitcoin.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a big, and it's a big unknown because we can't actually know until it starts to like really happen.
Exactly.
And like you said, it happens very gradually. Like it's so funny how so many of the things that Satoshi embedded in this thing emerge as like way more important and deeper than what you'd think. I wonder what he would think. I mean, he, she, they, whatever. I wonder what they think about where things have ended up and whether it met their expectations and exceeded it. Like, I just think there's so much cool shit. Even just, I was listening to Michael Saylor talk to Breedlove about the 7 layers of security. And he has this framework talking about all the different layers of security that Bitcoin has developed by co-opting industries like technology industries or energy industries. And I'm like, holy shit, this thing is like the ultimate black hole of monetary energy, and it's sucking everything into its orbit, and it's surreal to watch play out in real time. And it's like, it's a pretty cool shit. What excites you most about Bitcoin? What gets you the most stoked about Bitcoin these days, if there's anything in particular?
The man, yeah, it's always so hard to pick one thing. I recently it's been like we've had a bit more feedback from some of our members of our team. Went down to Mexico City and met with a bunch of our clients down there, and that was really exciting. Finding out how many of these people were entrepreneurs that were kind of using Ledden's products as a base from which to keep their savings and like finance their kind of business operations. That is exciting to me. That's like, bringing basic financial services to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it. That's what gets me going these days.
Amazing. Yeah. And like I said before, the use case of us as an endowment who wants to use those funds eventually to fund projects, we just don't, and the flexibility that it gives us to know like that is locked away into something that's going to be appreciating and purchasing power. And now there's all these companies engineering good experiences where we can take fiat money out into the real world without ever selling that base asset. Is like, that opens up so much potential in terms of like the more patient we are. Oh, if we have this big ambitious project, it's no longer like, oh, we don't have the money for that or we have to raise money. It's like, well, let's just wait 2 years and then it's actually possible. And that to me is very, very exciting. It's like a whole new realm of possibilities.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Mario, thank you so much for your time today. And
how about you? What's the
that
thing that you're most excited about?
I'm most excited about getting more people. I'm most excited about the Bitcoin catalyzing financial literacy. I know so many people that literally don't engage with a conversation about money because they're scared that they're going to look silly, or they're just literally have nothing to contribute because they know so little about it and they're almost embarrassed. And I think Bitcoin opens up the possibility to get people to pay more attention to improving their financial literacy. So and just, that cultural or collective increase in financial literacy makes it so that all the bullshit that's going on with some of the fiat currencies, or, at minimum, I don't see Bitcoin as like killing fiat. It's like, it's going to help fiat hold itself accountable better. I think that's the biggest thing that excites me. It's like, we're always going to use Canadian dollars or US dollars, or whatever. They will have a place, but I think they now have a reason to be less reckless. And I see it with my parents where like they're done working. They have this money that's supposed to last them the rest of their lives. And they see their house going up and they're like, this is great. It's like, well, everything that you have to spend money on for the rest of your life, thinking that amount of money is going to get you there, is now more expensive. And like that makes me kind of sad. So I think just them looking into money for the first time in their 50s, stimulated by Bitcoin and me yapping about Bitcoin all the time, is like, that's kind of exciting to me. So anyway, how do people find you if they want to look you up on the internet or on social media? And then after that, we'll kind of sign off.
Yeah, hit me up on Twitter. I'm Mario_Gibney, and honestly, just Google Mario Gibney. I'm the only one out there. So
and what's your podcast name?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the podcast is the Unhashed Podcast. Don't listen to it around your kids. It's R-rated. It's a very niche, crass type of four dudes just shoot the shit. And But if that's what you're into, give us a look. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter.
Amazing. Well, Mario, thanks for being here at the Stoa today. To everyone listening, thanks for being here as well and for your attention. And if you enjoyed the conversation, you can go to bitcoinstoa.com and send some sats to the QR code. That's how we're going to continue to fund this project. And yeah, from everyone here, have a great day. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.